get to the Hall of Fame? Hope, optimism, faith. You have to have the hope, the faith, and the optimism to overcome adversity and to keep moving and keep doing things that no one else is doing. And people might even think you're crazy. It's the attitude we choose towards unavoidable suffering. We see things and we say, okay, I'm supposed to be like this. And they lock us up. And so when you forget yourself, you just let go of everything and just relate to the situation, not from self-interest, not from self-consciousness. When you're in flow, you're not there. There's no self-consciousness. You're not focused on how you're doing. You're fully engaged in what you're doing, fully deployed, fully self-expressed.
Well, hey everybody, welcome back to this. I'm your host, Shauna Griffiths, and today we are rolling with an incredible real leader. I'll tell you folks, I don't get very nervous before I record these, and I don't get too much of a fangirl anymore, but George Mumford, you are joining us today, and I am a fangirl. You are incredible, a performance and mindset expert and mindfulness expert. And I'm so glad that you're here today. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you. And I love your energy.
Ah,
And it's interesting that I believe that all the things you just said about me, if you didn't have those inside of you, you wouldn't be able to relate to it.
oh, that means the world coming from you. I'll tell you. I keep your book handy. Those of you who are listening, I'm pulling it up and showing on the screen. Unlocked, your most recent book. I have read it. I've read it twice. First time I read it, I was preparing for a 100-mile mountain bike race that I was doing with
Oh
my
man.
husband. And it's just exactly what you said. It spoke to me, like the words like jumped out into my heart, into my head. And I kept thinking of it, that mindfulness component really helped me through that race. And I, like I said, I've got it handy on my desk because I reference it, everything. And I've listened to you on so many podcasts. So I definitely am picking up what you're putting down, as they say.
Yes. Well, the interesting thing is, I the book came out in May, but we wrote the book was finished way before that, and I've learned more about unlocking since the book came out than I I learned when I was first writing it. So it's a process, right? It's a continuing understanding of it, and why am I able to do that? Because this is how I work to people. I'm talking about this every day. We're talking about it now. And what happens is as I go over it and we go over it, we find something new. I mean, I pick up my book I was sharing with you, and you can feel the energy coming out of it. I wrote it, and I probably read it already 8 times. My Mindful Athlete book I read over 50 times because I keep going back to it. And when you go back to it, you listen. And Man's Search for Meaning by Viktor Frankl, I've been reading that book for probably close to 40 years. And I discovered YouTube when I was listening to some stuff. And all of a sudden, I said, wait a minute, I've been reading this book all these years and I never got that part of it.
Yeah.
And now I got that part of it. And so it's a reflection, it's a contemplation. And they say we only retain something like 20 or 30% of what we read. So we have to read at least 3 times to get probably 50% of what's being offered. So it makes sense that if you keep, it becomes a meditation, and that's part of my morning process is reading. Not just praying and meditating, but reading and getting my mind right and getting some inspiration and or getting reminded about the greatness within, getting reminded about how to access that greatness.
Yeah, absolutely. I love the reference to that about coming back to it over time because I caught myself saying this recently about my hometown in Ann Arbor, where I actually feel different when I go back there now. And I caught myself saying the reality is Ann Arbor hasn't changed. I have changed. And so it's like what you're saying, the words on the book, on your book, it's not that the words change in the book, but as I evolve, I go back to those and I
That's right.
can see them differently. They hit me in a different way. And it's just that it supports that continual growth and evolution.
Yes. I kind of slipped out on one of my at home at George. I have this YouTube series I do every once a week for the last 3 years or so, and it's continuous inquiry.
Ah,
So it's this a bit, we don't arrive, it doesn't stay. So it's like a river. It keeps flowing. It doesn't stop. It
Yeah.
keeps moving, and so we have to keep moving, and we have
Right.
to realize that everything changes. Now you're right. These physical structures, and maybe the town is kind of the same or the place, but it changes because you change. And
Yeah.
so when you change, then how you see it is going to be different.
Right.
Does that make any sense? And so,
Absolutely.
and then you realize, yeah, but the most important thing that you can control is your inner game, how you are
Mm.
perceiving things, how you seeing things.
Yeah.
And so that's the thing we have control over. And that's what I got reminded by Viktor Frankl when I was listening to his stuff again. And this idea of, I call it the forget yourself to find yourself. He calls it self transcendence.
Oh yeah.
How you get beyond yourself and finding meaning is pointed out there.
Right.
It's about connecting with someone or something and actually accessing your potential for the highest good, for the greatest good.
Yeah, absolutely. I heard you say that recently on a couple of the podcasts that I was listening to, just about that element of losing yourself to find yourself. And I met up with a friend recently who's going through a big change in her career, and she was feeling like stuck and cut off. And I referenced that what you said, and I talked to her about that connecting with other people, and then because I think sometimes people don't necessarily know the how of doing that. Like it makes
Hmm.
sense what you're saying, but when I suggested mentoring or reaching out to someone or go volunteer, whatever those things are, sometimes we have to help people know how do you actually lose yourself to find
Yes.
yourself. So I'd love to
Yeah.
hear more of your thoughts on that.
Yes. Well, this is an ongoing inquiry, if you might imagine, but and it's about this idea of when uh, Viktor Frankl talked about ways of finding meaning, and now the person that was doing the part that was sharing the information talked about activity. So the first way of finding meaning is creativity. It's creating something or creating something, a work of art, or creating something,
Yeah.
or or doing a deed, or doing something, creating
Mm-hmm.
something, doing something like you get committed to,
Yeah.
making things better, or doing something that like just to me, just being your authentic self gives everybody else the possibility and permission to do the same. And then he
Mm.
talks about the second way is um, encountering somebody or someone or something and or or experiencing something. And so there's something about, so he's really talking about love, engagement, connecting with self and other,
Yeah.
and connecting with the activity, through love or through a productive orientation. That's what Eric Fromm would call it. And then the third thing is the one that helped me the most is this idea of what attitude, in the space between stimulus and response, we have the freedom and power to choose. And it's the attitude we choose towards unavoidable suffering.
Yeah.
And it's when you find meaning in suffering, it ceases to be suffering. And he talks about this elderly gentleman he's talking to, and the gentleman's depressed, but it wasn't really a psychological issue. It was an existential issue
Mm.
about what meaning and purpose, and we live and we die. Why? What's the use, right? But he explained to the gentleman that what would happen if your wife died first, and I mean, if you died first and your wife survived, how would that be for her? She would have suffered greatly because she depends on me and everything. So now you can look at it and say your survival is actually preventing her from suffering. She's not suffering as much. And so what I learned to call reframing, or you interpret how you see things. And
Yeah.
this makes sense because when I was doing a lot of research on happiness with the Shauna Core research, 90% of our long-term happiness is predicated on how we interpret our experience.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Not 10%, but 90%. And so when you change the way you look at things, things you look at change. And so that's a reframe, or that's a rotation in consciousness. So now you look at it as, okay, now you can see the meaning of it, or you can
Hmm.
get meaning out of it and purpose, and then it ceases to be suffering. And then the guy
Yeah.
just shook his hand and got up. He was fine. No more depression. And so I'm not saying depression is not a real thing or whatever, but I think a lot of what we're dealing with is meaning and purpose.
Yeah.
This idea of, what's the meaning? And, we give meaning to things. It doesn't have meaning, in and of itself, but we project the meaning. Everything that I engage, I create the meaning it has for me.
Yeah.
So does that make sense? Not to get too heavy, but and so to forget yourself, to find yourself, is we have these ideas about who we are, and those ideas lock us up.
Hmm.
Or we see things and we say, okay, I'm supposed to be like this, or people expect me to be like that, and
Yeah.
they lock us up. And so when you forget yourself, you just let go of everything and just relate to the situation from not from self-interest, not from self-consciousness, but just being engaged, and forget yourself and just do the deed. Just be authentic and be helpful.
Yeah.
And in that activity, you forget who you are, and that's when we're in flow. You athlete, you
Hmm.
know that when you're
Yeah.
in flow, you're not there. There's no self-consciousness. You're not focused on how you're doing. You're fully engaged in what you're doing, fully deployed, fully self-expressed. That's
Yeah.
it.
Yeah.
And so when I think about that, when I think about forget yourself to find yourself, just expand who you think you are. It's another way of looking at it. The possibility of, I
Yeah.
can do this. I'm a bad mofo. I have a masterpiece within, and I have this capacity when I can be still and know, come from the eye of the hurricane, where there's a creativity and a wisdom that expresses itself, and
Yeah.
especially under adversity. So this idea of unavoidable suffering, and then turning towards it and bringing a quality, of attitude of authenticity, compassion, seeking to understand. Does that
Yeah.
make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. It makes so much sense. And when I talk about this, and something that I have to remind myself all the time is when I'm not choosing to take that approach, I'm actually getting in my own way. And when I
That's
think
right.
of it that way, I'm like, oh, hell no, I am not going to do that because I see the connection that I am contributing to that lockup, that state of mind, that paralysis, whatever that is. And
Mhm.
I heard one time, somewhat recently, someone say, like, we hear our own voices more than anything else.
That's right.
We're talking to ourselves. So, like, I say these things because as the audience is listening, sometimes people ask me, like, well, how do you operate the way you do? Or again, for me, there's no other choice that's acceptable to my soul. I have to keep these things in mind and understand that I'm meeting whatever is going externally with how I'm thinking about it and how I'm talking about it.
That's right.
And the first person I'm talking to and thinking here that is myself.
Yes, yes. And it's interesting because it's an inner dialogue. And I remember reading, I read a lot, I read over a book of, well, maybe it's not a lot to some people, but it's, I read about a book a week. Um,
I heard you say that
so,
one time, and I was like,
yeah,
oh boy, I better get to
yeah.
reading.
That's minimal. It might be more,
Yeah,
but
yeah,
the thing is, uh, what I want to say, it's this idea of just really understanding that as much as we know, there's a lot more we don't know, and it's
mm,
about that continuous inquiry. How do I do this? Why am I looking at things the way that I'm looking at things? How can I unlock? And the
yeah,
first step is to notice that we unlock. We have an override. We override ourselves. Sometimes something
yeah,
will say, okay, well, why don't you look here for what's lost? No, 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 it wouldn't be there because you come up with some rationale, but you just overrode your wisdom,
yeah.
or
Oh,
or the knowing. You see what I'm
yeah,
saying?
yeah.
And we have this
Oh,
ability to override because we have these filters. They call it a deterministic screen, and it allows us to see certain things and not other
yeah,
things. So, as an athlete, you're gonna have your deterministic screen is colored by being an athlete,
yeah,
right?
yeah,
And so sometimes that's helpful. but sometimes it helps you see some things, but not other things. So we have to be able to understand that we have on, like if I have on fear, everything's colored by fear. That's a different psychology than if it's covered by love. And then there's a, there's a rest, an ability to be at ease, and then we learn better. And then our pattern detector picks up things. Does it make sense? Not to get too complicated, but it comes down to, reading about, understanding, just seeking to understand. So it could be watching podcasts or listening to podcasts
Yeah.
or conversations, having conversations like this. But we have to understand that the objective is not winning. The objective is authenticity. And as
Yeah.
a result of being authentic and being unlocked and embracing our greatness, that's how we unlock, embrace our greatness. Then we find our flow, our rhythm, the pace that nature intended for us, and then we're staying in our lane and our flow, and then we discover success. Oh, how that happen? Oh, that's pretty good, but it's not something that we're seeking. It's a byproduct of just embracing ourselves and finding the flow.
Yeah, absolutely. I think in that, what's been really key for me is truly letting go of shoulds or judgments that I might place on myself or society, and like truly reminding myself on a daily basis about the plan of the universe. And I know that might sound to some people kind of out there, but I do believe that what you're saying, like tapping into that wisdom, having that curiosity about yourself, continuing to evolve and unpack, like that's, I think, part of giving into that almost and welcoming that more is really, I think, where we can start to almost tune into what is meant for us by the universe.
Yeah, a still small voice within is easily drowned out. We gotta
Yeah,
we gotta stop, get out of the noise and the clutter so it can express itself more. And
totally.
the more
When
we
you
listen to it, the more it's available to us.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I agree. When you were saying a minute ago about, I was actually looking for something I saw this morning. I'll tell you about it. When you said, like, you put your glasses on, you said, like, we have these filters basically,
That's
right?
right.
And so I saw this thing this morning that Nelson Mandela, I'm reading it. It just says, may your choices reflect your hopes, not your fears. And
Yes. Yes.
yeah,
Yes. Yes. You're an athlete. How do you get to the Hall of Fame? Anyway, and the HOF, Hall of
yeah.
Fame. You know how you get there? Hope, optimism, faith.
Oh, yeah.
That's a good one, huh? So
Yeah.
and
It
that's
is.
it. Because you have to have the hope, the faith, and the optimism to overcome adversity and to keep moving and keep doing
Yeah.
things that no one else is doing. And people might even think you're crazy. Now, a good friend of mine, Michael Gervais, just came out with a new book, First Step in Mastery. But anyway, what stands out to me is fear of other people's
Uh,
opinions. That's what he's saying as a premise to that. I just started reading it this morning a little bit. He sent me a copy, and
yeah.
but that's it. We worry about people, places, and things. And one of the other Georgisms I talk about is this idea of you meet what you mirror. But it's not mine. I stole it from somebody else, or I borrowed it. Uh, but you meet what you mirror. So when you change, the environment changes, and that's probably one of the reasons. I was talking to a relative recently. One of the reasons people, don't. Well, one of the reasons we don't reach our potential and we don't express our fear, because one side of that coin, I have a quarter here. The head is freedom.
Mm,
The tails is uncertainty, anxiety.
yeah.
And I was reminded once again reading Viktor Frankl, and he talked about, say, this is where we want to go, this is where we are, and there's tension in
Hmm.
between there. And we have this idea that it shouldn't be any tension or everything should be easy. Easy. No, I say no stroke and no swag. That's what I mean. Is you got to endure the tension. You got to move through it. When you move through it, you get to another level of power, capability,
Right.
um, satisfaction, joy. And so that's what we don't embrace. Say yes to it, and then allow it to be a stepping stone, not a roadblock. And so
Yeah.
this idea of, yes, we have to understand this uncertainty, but everything's uncertain. The future's uncertain. Let's be real
Yeah.
with that. We're talking about
Right.
authenticity again. But can you say embrace it, say yes to it, say, I don't know what's going to happen, but I know I get to choose how I'm going to respond or react to it. And that's
Yeah.
it. And then in that
That's
space, I can still be true to my principles. True north is true
Mhm.
north. You can say it's not, and maybe it takes you a while before you realize you're way off track. But in the immediacy of experience, if you don't have these principles, because they don't change, they're timeless and they're self-evident. If you're willing to see the truth, know the truth, and the truth shall make you free, and to thine own self be true. Your heart would tell you, you listen, what do I need to do? So it took me my recovery to start to realize that I'm responsible and I get to choose who I'm being.
Yeah.
Because, and I'm going to send this, I got this, I thought it was Brian Tracy, but it was some other philosopher. And I'm putting it in my own words. I don't know if it's exact. You are not what you think you are, comma,
Mm.
but what you think you are.
Mm.
So there's a difference between what you think and what you actually are.
Yeah. Absolutely.
How you're being.
How you
Okay.
being?
So
Yeah.
we can say I have this idea about who I am, but then I'm loving and I'm compassionate. But then somebody just cut me off, and I just gave him the bird, and all that. And he's like, okay, so you may have this idea about you, but you're not consistent with that. We talked about the consistency, walking the talk,
Yeah.
or that's another word for integrity. But
Yeah.
and then when you get out of integrity, you don't have to damn yourself to hell. You just have to get back on integrity. That's it. Just get back
Yeah.
on and say, that's what they say. To sin is to be against yourself or to not meet your aim. That's another way of looking at it.
Right. Right.
Instead of damning
And
yourself to hell. you know.
yeah, and I mean, but it all comes down like you're saying, like it's about choice and responsibility. And I actually had this friend of mine on the show. She played basketball at Michigan just before I did, Shimmy. And in the show, Shimmy was talking about the different, or that like when she was coaching D1 women's basketball, it was like she would tell her players, I want your goals and your actions to be aligned. And that's what we're talking about here, I think, is as leaders who are in the audience listening to this, we have a responsibility as leaders to make the choices every day so that our actions align with our goals, like Shimmy said, like you're saying, we have that, because then that matches up who we think what we think about ourselves, and like who we are and how we're actually, walking the path in life.
Yes. So I just remembered when we talked before, this Neville Goddard, he talks about your self-talk is a reflection of your mind, and your mind is a reflection of God or the universe. So think about that's a good one, right? And
Yeah.
so that's what we're talking about, is just realizing, well, how do you get in alignment or be in integrity? And in the four agreements, he talks about be impeccable with your word, and that's what that's about. We create with the word, and so this idea of walking our talk or having alignment with what we say and what we do, what we intend and what we do, it's just really powerful. That's where the energy comes from. When you get out of integrity, then your word doesn't matter, and as he talks about, creating black magic versus creating magic or whatever. But integrity, being clear with our word. And how do you do it? You do it by an uncritical observation of your reactions to life. So you got to watch yourself. That's why being in the eye of the hurricane and being able to observe, have awareness, be aware, be observant, be non-reactive, and to be non-judgmental. That's being mindful. It's just letting it mirror mind. Whatever happens, we relate to it. But we have this tendency of infusing or embellishing it with self-centered interests, abstract thinking, associative thinking, what we know versus what's happening in the moment. And so the whole process is about purity. And I talk about pure performance or purity of observation. So we want to be clear.
Yeah.
So if we see clearly, then we'll behave clearly. That makes any
Very
sense.
true.
So if you
Yeah.
know the images, because you're right. When you have that self talk, you're not just thinking, well, I got to talk to Susie, and she's a pain in the ass, and you're having a conversation about Susie, she's not there, and you're not just having a conversation. You can visualize the interaction and what the scene is and everything, but it's subconscious. We don't even know we're doing it, and so a
Right.
big part of this is just realizing the way to unlock is to change your self talk so it reflects what you say you want to do. So whatever you're doing, your self-talk, your dialogue has to be in alignment with that.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Couldn't agree more. And I think it's really interesting because, again, for people who are listening, if this sounds interesting, but you're like, okay, but what's the how of it? I think to simply becoming aware that this is something that you want to work on, or you're like, oh, wait, that sounds interesting to me. I often say, like, awareness is step one. Then
Yes,
it's
that's right.
things about like practicing. So asking ourselves those questions if we're having that chatter about, Susie and being a pain in the ass. It's like, okay, asking ourselves, why am I thinking this? What's behind this? Where's the key
Hmm.
learning? And then it's
Yeah.
the reality is it's not about Susie, it's about me.
Yes, yes. And that is, in the mindful athlete, I don't know if I have it in unlock. But Gandhi says our beliefs become our thoughts
Yeah.
become our words become our actions become our habits become our values become our destiny. So once again, the deterministic screen, your belief. If you believe you're lovable, or your view is love, your habit's going to be about your habit of loving or being loved, and then that's your value is love and being love and loving, and then that's your destiny, love. So so that's just an equation, but we got to start thinking about the idea that our self-talk is a reflection of our mind, and our mind is where everything begins. So one way of looking at it is taking control, being proactive, and choosing your mindset so that your self-talk, and then making sure your self-talk is in line with that. So that's the how-to, is just observe yourself, because
Observing self.
yeah, self-observation. And then I talk about it as self-awareness and self-observation, awareness, and then this awareness of our thoughts, feelings, and behaviors, and even how we interpret things, especially whether we have the right mindset, the growth mindset versus the fixed mindset, right? And then understanding that everything begins with the mind, and just looking at it, and realizing i I am responsible. No excuses. Even things that happen to me beyond my control, I get to choose how I respond to it. What I'm
Oh,
saying is this idea of self-regulation. So self-awareness,
yeah,
self-regulation,
self-regulation.
self-regulated thoughts, feelings, behaviors, and how we're seeing things. And so we start to see things. And so when you're an elite performer, you see mistakes as opportunities.
Oh, yeah,
You see obstacles as challenges. You see difficulties as opportunities to express the greatness within. You
yeah,
see it as it's like the baptism of the fire. Difficulty. Now I'm going back to what Franco said. Is this is where we are, where we want to go. This is where we are, and that tension has to be endured, and not just endured like this, but to
no,
be embraced in a way where
embrace.
you see it as the actual path. And what's in the way becomes the way. So it's not like this shouldn't be happening. I got injured. This, I can't play. Well, injuries are part of the game.
Yeah,
Not getting selected or getting selected, that's part of the game. That's just it. You got to embrace it all. And by
yeah,
saying yes to everything and generating hope, now you're looking for the solution. What's the lesson
hmm,
versus being a victim of circumstance or
totally.
being a victim? So it's just understanding that we make choices, we are responsible, but we have this ability to figure shit out.
Yeah. And when you talk about it, it's so true. And when you talk about it from the elite performer as an athlete, again, like people in the audience, the same thing, everything that George just said applies to us as leaders in life and in business. And it's,
That's right.
again, it's moving through things, it's the choices that we make, it's holding ourselves accountable and
Yeah.
responsible for the way
Hmm.
we behave. And the actions we're taking for the belief system we have. And I can't stress enough that element of self observation. And so I know you are a proponent of breath and meditation. And so I just pause on that for the audience because, again, in the how do I get myself there? These are some of the tools, the breath and meditation, which I'd love for you to talk a little bit about that can
Yes.
help to unlock some of that.
Yeah. So let's get clear about something.
Okay.
I, I got my mind on money, money on my mind. That's Dr. Dre, Snoop Dogg, and there might be others that attributed to that. I know definitely Dr. Dre, Snoop Dogg. That's meditation. So to
Mm.
meditate means to contemplate. To contemplate means to look at repeatedly, to look at closely. So I'm here to tell you, Shauna, that we meditate from the time we wake up to the time we go to sleep, and probably while we're sleeping. But
Yeah.
the time we wake up to the time we go to sleep with because whatever's on our mind, that's our meditation. And we
Mm.
being masterpieces, we have this ability to manifest what we hold in mind. So think about that. I'm gonna say that again.
Yes.
You know, and the strangest secret. There's a book called The Strangest Secret by Earl Nightingale. Do you know what the strangest secret is?
What?
We become what we think about.
Yes, sir.
So so we have to understand that meditation is just what we're thinking about, what we have on our mind, what we're looking at, what we're focused on. And so we're meditating all the time. And what I'm saying is there's a reason why we want to be still and know, and when we're just sitting in silence and stillness. And how is that helpful? Because that helps the nervous system, especially you talk about I'm right-handed, so the left brain, the sympathetic, it controls everything. The parasympathetic, which is this is the trees, this is the forest, this is the little 1 + 1 = 2, this is 1 + 1 = 6, or whatever. And so when we quiet the mind, when we just focus on one thing, whether it's the breath, the body, or whatever it is, it it elicits this what they call a relaxation response. This is what was coined by Herbert Benson, but it gets us in the rest and digest. And that's why you might notice if you meditate and you're being quiet, you can hear your stomach gurgling and all that stuff, because it's the opposite of the fight or flight, where all of your blood is going to your big muscles so you can fight or flee, versus so now I just ate, so that undigested food doesn't get digested because the focus, the alarm is telling us we're into survival mode,
Mm-hmm.
right? And so everything else, all bets are off. Is just getting ready to fight or flee. And so we need to be able, and this is not now. This is the reptilian brain that we have, and we need it. We still need it even now. When you walk across the street, you can't contemplate whether you should move or not when the car's coming. You gotta let your reptilian brain move your ass out of the way. Okay. Right? I'm just saying. But we have a lot of perceived threats that are not
Yeah.
really threats, but they're
Mm-hmm.
perceived threats. But the nervous system doesn't know the difference between what we think about and what we experience. And
Yeah.
so if you imagine you're under threat and you're in, your amygdala is just always scanning for danger, then you can't be in growth mode. You're either in survival mode or growth mode. This guy, Bruce Lipton, wrote a book called The Biology of Belief. And in there he says on a cellular level, we're either in survival mode or growth mode. As you know, either on your heels or on your toes. And so we have to understand that. So what does this have to do with meditating? Well, we have to train our minds to see clearly, but we have to train our nervous systems to be in that rest and digest so that we're not constantly in the stress reaction or reactivity, or the reptilian brain, where we get emotionally hijacked.
Yeah.
So the information goes directly to the amygdala instead of having a space where it goes to our prefrontal cortex, and we can actually reflect on what's happening and that sort of thing. So that's just kind of a science thing. So we need to have whatever it is. Some of us go for a walk, we work, we might ride, like whatever, but we got to be fully engaged in the activity, but we still need the rest. That's active, but we need passive or active recovery, and part of that is just being able to sit and reflect, think about things, and of course, true understanding comes from reflecting on experience. So from a performance point of view, we talk about the forethought that has to do with strategy and motivation. Then there's the performance activity itself. And then even there, you got to be making adjustments in real time. So you got to ask yourself, what am I doing? What am I getting? What's my intention? What do I need to change? to keep moving. And then after, we have the reflective phase where you reflect on your performance, what worked, what didn't work. But true understanding comes from reflecting on experience. Okay, I had this experience, like I talked to you about, gave a presentation. It was good. People loved it. But there was a part of me that felt like I could have been more prepared.
Mhm.
Now, I'm not judging. It's not a judgment. It's just, okay, there's room for improvement there. There's an opportunity there.
Do I
That's
do next
different.
time? Yeah.
Yes, but there has to be that reflecting. But if I don't reflect on it, just do it and keep going, then I'm going to end up like I was before, where I was doing the same thing, expecting different results. They call that insanity. So we
Yeah.
have to be able. So does that make sense? I know I'm talking a
It,
little bit, but I'm trying to give you the sense of it. So being able to have a contemplative practice for me sometimes walking and doing physical stuff because I'm kinesthetic,
yeah.
but also reading a book. Just having a book and having it in my hand. It just so happens I have my book here because I read it a lot. Read different books. And I had Michael's book earlier
Yeah.
and reading Man's Search for Reading. So I'm looking, but it's something that tells me, okay, things are just really unsettling right now. With the wars and people
Yeah.
not really being authentic with how they're seeing things, and of course, that's what we do. We're focused on how other people see us as being part of a tribe instead of being aligned with principles. We're putting
Mm.
personality before principles, or this is my tribe, so whatever they say goes, rather than saying, no,
Mm.
what would we do that works for best? Don't take sides, just focus on the principles. And then that'll
Yeah.
help us kind of get the clarity. Does
Yeah.
that make sense?
It makes
So
sense, and
meditating
I want
and
to pause
reflecting.
just for
Yeah.
the to say something with the audience. I think that everything you just described about whatever type of, again, air quotes, meditation, right? And I only say air quotes because is it movement? Is it sitting still? Again, I'm putting an exclamation on it, I call it, for the leaders who are listening, because this is for us as leaders, but it's also for the team that we're a part of and that we're leading. I mean, you worked with some of the greatest athletes, and Michael Jordan and Kobe Bryant, and like, yes, super competitive. They did all these things. They were incredible athletes, and the way that they led, by the way that they did and the way that they had presence. Again, I think we can translate that. We can see, as you talk about, you can see possibility when you see athletes operating that way. And I like for leaders to realize that like that is possible for all of us, and that has impact on the way that we're showing up every day for ourselves and our team and the business at large.
Yes, that's why I wrote Unlocked, because I think even though the mindful athlete applies, you can put whatever you want in there. People kept seeing us as it's about athletes or about elite performance. No, we all have this capacity to be unlocked. We all have
Yeah.
this greatness within. We all can are capable of finding the flow and discovering success. And and just to take a minute, just think about it. So just like, I don't know, hopefully people are sitting and they're not driving if they're listening, watching it, but pull over. If you just notice right now that you're sitting and you're breathing, but you're not aware of it, your attention is normally out here. But if you bring your awareness back to inside the body and feeling the felt sense of sitting, like you can physically feel what it feels like to be sitting, where are your feet,
Yeah.
your knees, your sit bones or your buttocks. You're sitting on that. Is your
Mhm.
sternum like this or is it up like this? Are you focused? And you can have your eyes open and closed and just be aware of the fact that there's a certain kind of breathing we want to be engaged in, and that's the belly breathing. So as you breathe in, the belly expands. You use your full capacity of your lungs, breathing through your nose. So you're not doing the chest breathing where you actually elicit the stress reaction.
Yeah.
And you just breathe a little bit deeper, breathing in and breathing out, but just noticing that we're sitting and you can feel, like I can feel my entire body as I'm breathing in, breathing out. And there's going to be parts that are going to be tight. Some parts are going to feel a certain way. But the idea is not to try to do anything, but this is what the mindfulness is. Just notice, relax and let go. Just notice, oh, it's there, but you don't have to do anything about it. You don't even have to interpret it. It's about just letting it be and just being in that place of rest, that ease where you're just noticing without having to push anything away or pull it towards us or interpret what it means, but just to be, to feel what it feels like to just be sitting and breathing. from the inside out. And you
Yeah.
can do this while we're talking. You can sit there and you can just listen, and every once in a while just tune in to yourself. Or if you really want, you can put your chest on your sternum, palm on your sternum, and it can help feel, okay, just be here now. Just feel what that feels like. What the palm feels like, that sense of pressure,
Mm.
the tingling, the energy, whether it's cool or whether it's tight or whatever. And so we start to observe things from moment to moment. And then when we can close our eyes and be in silence, then we're able to get with ourselves and get to know what our heart is saying, what our body is saying, and how we really feel about things without worrying about what other people say or having some override that says, well, you should do this, you should do that.
Yeah.
And just notice, how do you really feel?
Yeah. Yeah, it's incredible. Even as you're talking through that, like the energy just shifts,
That's right.
and it's so I hope that as people heard that or you're watching this, that is a gift that you can give yourself. We give ourselves. And when we can operate that way, we're actually sharing that gift with others. Again, like leaders, as you're listening to this, next time you're in a meeting, you're with your team, and the energy is like, I call it kind of like scattered marbles bouncing off all over the place.
That's right.
We can actually take a breath and like show that, or calm yourself, and it has such a reverberation, I think, is really important. And part of what I do with this show and through my own work and leadership and coaching is to try to help share some of these little like tricks and tools, and we can keep them up our sleeve, because there is action to be taken in a different way to shift the dynamic of what, in a lot of ways, the leadership has been happening in not positive ways. And so again, it's like the more we can raise our consciousness to hold ourselves accountable and responsible to operate differently and share that gift with others, I think that we can be a part of the change instead of being part of the problem.
Yes. And so what you just said is so huge about things like a couple of tips. I mean, I have a takeaway obviously, but even before you start to contemplate and meditate or whatever, if you smile and you focus on what's right, or you think about being grateful for something or other, but going in with a positive mindset, that's everything. So just imagine if you started every meeting going and focus on the opportunity to get together and to have a championship conversation, how we're going to do something conversation, a conversation that leads to action. And you go in and you start off, whether it's a moment of silence or just start off like, okay, I need to give myself the opportunity to arrive here because I'm coming here, but I'm coming here with the things that are still percolating, or the things that are going to happen that I got to do now, and I don't really have time for this meeting, but I'm here and I'm thinking about other things so that I'm actually being where I just was
Yeah.
instead of being where I am. Right. And so just taking that time as a group to just settle down and just notice and just tune into the body and just really get present, get clear, and then have the agenda where you have specificity of what it is you're going to work on. So to be able to focus, you need goals. You need to have an aim. You need to understand that we just need to be here in the group consciousness or the collective. When we're coming out of that silence, that stillness, there's a wisdom and a creativity that can come out of it. And we're asking not the why questions, but the how to.
Mm.
But the why questions will give you a good analysis of what's wrong, but it doesn't lead to action. It may not lead to action. It might lead to depression or cynicism. But we
Yeah.
have to be able to understand. We got to do both. We got to understand, what is it, and how do we relate to it in a way that empowers us, that keeps us in alignment with our goal.
Yeah.
Does
Yeah.
that make sense? I'm
Absolutely.
gonna
When
turn
you
this off because there's a
totally.
red button.
Yeah, absolutely. No, it makes a ton of sense. And when you were talking about the presence, I just want to again like stress that for the audience, as I have emphasized it for myself recently. I was watching something and someone was talking about the ministry of presence. And I was like, wait a minute, I need to learn more about that. So I looked it up, and it has a religious background and foundation. But I think a more modern kind of interpretation of it is just that truly that gift of being present. And what you said is being present as you're starting, that time with people. And it is you can be present with yourself, is some of the stuff we talked about earlier. And again, also as we are leading people, being present for others is game changing.
Yeah, but you gotta begin with yourself. You gotta be
Yes.
present for yourself, but not to end with yourself. But be
Right.
present for yourself so you can be present with others. And I was just once again hearing emotional intelligence, and I think they pretty much talked about self self awareness, self regulation, and then social intelligence of being able to know how to relate to others, and I forget what the fourth one is, but it really talks about self and other and how to establish a
Mm.
relationship, is the social support, but
Yep.
also how to relate to each other in ways that are conducive to communicating and honoring each other,
Yeah,
that sort of thing.
absolutely.
So having the emotional intelligence for yourself, but also for others,
Yeah.
because we're in networks of relationships, and how do we do that? But you got to begin with yourself. You got to
Yeah.
you because if you have self awareness, then you have the possibility of having group awareness or
Oh, I like
community awareness
that.
or
Yep.
other awareness.
Yeah,
And it's the same thing
absolutely.
if you regulate yourself, and then you have a shot at regulating, uh, whoever you're leading. And so,
Hmm.
yeah, so the leadership thing is really important, and being present and being real, being authentic, because the trust factor, the
Oh,
speed of trust is huge. So
yeah.
we have to be able to, but it begins here. And so when you're comfortable with yourself, then you can get comfortable being uncomfortable with things you have to do, and interacting with others, because I think that's, for me, it was really challenging relating to other people, because I like to live in my own little stuff, and I didn't have to worry about people's behavior. I didn't have to control anybody. I had trouble controlling myself, but then you realize I ain't the other one, so you forget yourself and then be of service, or reach out to people with the opportunity of embracing them and seeing their masterpiece, seeing that they have value, and that our most important asset, if we want to call it that, is people, our relationships. And that we have to make more investments and stop spending money on things, although we need to do that. But if we spent the money on people first, or made the investment in ourselves and others,
Hmm.
we might find it'll be a much more cohesive, exciting adventure.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. George, you are amazing. And I've had such an incredible conversation with you. I have to admit, I would keep you on for longer if I could, but I want to be respectful of your time. So
Yeah.
two things before I let you go. One is just, can you talk, if people have heard you here today, and I believe you're doing some workshops. I know you have this book again. I keep it on my desk unlocked, which is
Right.
amazing, folks. And but how else? What are some of the things that you have going on that people could tap into to get more of
Yes.
what you
Yes.
represent?
Thanks for sharing that. So as it turns out, twice a year we do this, the Mindful Athlete online course,
Oh yeah.
and we're moving into. We just finished week 4. So this cycle, our theme is Serenity in the Eye of the Hurricane. We have a theme
Mm,
every 6 weeks, so this is like the fourth year we're doing this. So twice a year I have that, so you can go
okay.
online, but go to my website georgemumford.com. But also, I do presentations. I work one on one with folks. I work with
Okay.
organizations. I have a YouTube channel where there's a lot of free, like I do at home with George. I started it during COVID and continue to do it.
Okay.
So we got well over 150 episodes. And
Oh
but if you
wow.
go to my website, there's all sorts of things. We're developing a youth course.
Yeah.
I have I have a, I think I have a master class on anxiety.
Oh.
I'm dealing with anxiety and stuff like that. But
Okay.
what's really helpful is just getting a clear idea of what people need, what people are interested in. But there's
Mhm.
so many podcasts, as you said.
Yeah.
But in the books, the Mindful Athlete, Unlocked. But going to
Okay.
the website and just seeing what's offered there, and also it's okay to request, or give us some insight in terms of what you're interested in.
Okay.
So yeah,
Good.
it's funny.
Thank
I'm
you.
still a recovering perfectionist, because I feel like when I tell people what I'm doing, what's available, I feel like it's not enough. But then the other people
Oh
say,
my
I'm
goodness.
exhausted listening to you.
Yeah, well, there's it's it's so great, and I'm telling you, folks, I have been benefiting so much from tapping into. I've been a little bit of a stalker on your LinkedIn and on your website, and really, following some of the podcasts, listening to them that you've been on. So, folks, when I do post this, I'll post some additional things as I share the content from this episode, so that hopefully people can also partake in the gifts that you bring this world. And then the last thing I ask every guest is, what would you hope that the audience takes, like the most important things they can take from your episode of my show?
Yes. They they need to embrace their greatness. They have greatness that that is unlimited, and that so that's it. We have this greatness. You got to embrace your greatness within. It can be you're going to have access to it. You can develop it. That's number one. Number two, it's an inside job. Only you can do it. And number three, to the degree that you're able to embrace your greatness, find a flow, you're going to discover success. You're going to have an amazing life. So if you don't like your life you have now, whether it's work, love, or play, that you can change it, you can unlock it, but you have to understand that it's an inside job. But you are wired for success. So if you don't take anything, you're a bad mofo. Whether or not you express it and access it, that's something else. But uh, the book will help you unlock, and as well as all of the teachings, as well as what Sean is doing in her podcast. There's so many various things that are going out there that are helpful. We just have to say yes to it and take responsibility
Yeah,
for it,
absolutely.
for
Absolutely.
accepting. And yeah,
George,
yeah.
I can't thank you enough. Like I said, you are amazing. And everybody, I hope that you have a great day and that you enjoyed this episode.